The moment the K-9 lunged forward, everyone in the courtroom froze. But what it attacked wasn't who you'd expect. Gasps echoed. A bailiff reached for his taser. The judge jolted upright. The little girl, Lila, didn't flinch. She just held up her hand. Not shaking, not afraid, not even surprised. The German Shepherd had bypassed the man everyone thought it would go for, the one in the defendant's seat, sweating bullets under the courtroom lights. Instead, it launched at the prosecutor, and it didn't bark, it didn't growl, it sat. Right there, at his feet, and stared up at him like it knew. Then, something unimaginable happened. The prosecutor dropped his pen. His face went pale. His lip trembled, and for a single second, just one heartbeat, everyone saw it. Guilt, not the kind the courtroom was used to. This was deeper, raw, cracking under pressure. He stood too quickly, knocking over his chair. I need a recess, he stammered, but Judge Hanover narrowed her eyes. No one leaves this room. And that's when the whispers began. The shift. Something was off. No one knew yet how deep the deception ran, how long this had been in motion. How this little girl, who hadn't spoken a single word since the day of her mother's death, had just shattered the entire narrative with one small, subtle signal to her dog. A signal no one had taught her, except her mom. And her mom had died 6 months ago. 6 months earlier. The day the world fell. Apart, Lila had been found in the hallway, barefoot and clutching her K-9's leash like her. Life depended on it. The dog, Zeus, was growling softly at the bathroom door. Inside was silence. Her mother's shoes peeked out from the edge of the tub. The responding officer would never forget what he saw. But what haunted him more was the way Lila kept pointing at her throat, trying to say something, no words, just eyes, wide and screaming in silence. They called it trauma-induced mutism, perfectly normal after a child witnesses something horrific. But this wasn't just trauma. This was intentional silence. Zeus had refused to leave the scene. The vet said the dog showed signs of heightened stress, as if he'd been trying to alert someone for hours. They called it a tragic case of domestic violence gone too far. Everyone believed it. Everyone. Except Zeus. The prosecutor's hands were trembling. Papers slid from his folder. "That dog is unstable," he said, trying to regain control of the room. "He attacked me." But Zeus hadn't even laid a paw on him. He was just sitting, calm, alert, watching, like he was waiting for something. Lila stood beside him, small, pale, dressed in a navy blue coat 2 sizes too big. Her hand was still, held up, 3 fingers curled, thumb to palm, and her pinky raised. It looked like nothing, a nervous tick, a child's unconscious gesture, but to Zeus, it meant everything. It was a signal. One her mother had used in training, one that meant, "Show me the truth." The early loop and the twist that flipped it all. Everyone thought this was a simple case of the father, Daniel Riker, snapping in a fit of rage. He'd been a suspect from day one. He had motive, they said, a history of temper, issues, and no alibi for the night of the murder. Lila had been placed with her aunt. The world moved on. The courtroom had been prepared for an emotional testimony. Instead, it got a miracle. Lila hadn't spoken in 6 months, but in that moment, surrounded by polished wood, heavy glares, and the scent of cold justice, she gave a silent command to her dog, and the dog obeyed. Not to attack her father, but to reveal something else entirely. The prosecutor, the same man who had spearheaded the case, cherry-picked the evidence, coached witnesses, was now sweating through his shirt, because Zeus had walked up to him, because the girl's eyes hadn't left his face, because she knew, and what no one in the courtroom realized yet was that Zeus hadn't acted out of loyalty. He had acted out of memory, out of obedience to a command once used in a very different context. The night of the murder, someone had given Zeus the same signal, but it wasn't Lila, and it wasn't her father. The judge leaned forward. "Counselor, unless you have an objection grounded in fact or law, I suggest you stay seated." Zeus let out a low, soft whine. Lila's eyes glistened. Then, slowly, she pointed at the man again. Her hand shook this time, and in the deafening silence of the courtroom, one thought settled like a shadow across every face. What if the killer had been in plain sight the entire time? Great. Let's move on to... Most people saw Lila Riker as the girl who wouldn't speak, but the silence didn't start the day her mother died. It started before that, before the blood-stained bathtub, before the cameras and courtrooms, before the world took sides between a grieving husband and a headline-hungry prosecutor. Lila had already been living in two realities. One was full of light, morning pancakes, stories whispered under warm blankets, and the quiet thump of paws at her feet. The other was shadows. Doors closing with a little too much force, conversations that paused when she entered the room. Her mother's smile, the one that used to stretch across her whole face, shrinking day by day until it became something hollow, fragile, fake. Lila didn't understand why the light kept disappearing, but Zeus did. He'd started sleeping by the door every night, nose twitching at even the smallest sound. Her mom said he was trained for protection. What she didn't say, what she couldn't say, was who they needed protection from. Lila's father, Daniel, wasn't a monster. Not at first. He was just broken. Once a decorated police officer, he had seen too much, buried too much. The drinking started as a numbing tool. Then came the anger, the absences, the late-night arguments behind closed doors, but he never raised a hand to Lila, never even shouted at her. Still, she learned to disappear when things got loud. Her mother taught her signals, little hand gestures that meant big things. Go hide. Call Zeus. Don't make a sound. At the time, it felt like a game, until the night it wasn't. The night her mother died, Lila had done everything right. She followed the hand signal. She took Zeus to the hallway closet. She waited, but the signal that haunted her, the one she saw from the crack in the door, was the one her mother made right before the bathroom door slammed shut. The one that meant, "Remember what I taught you." She hadn't understood it then. But 6 months later, in a courtroom bursting with lawyers, lies, and loud opinions, she finally did. Daniel Riker sat in the defendant's chair with sunken eyes and a face carved by guilt. But not the guilt of a killer. The guilt of a man who had failed the woman he loved, and the child who still watched him like he was a stranger. He didn't fight for himself in court. He barely spoke, as if he believed he deserved to rot, even if he didn't wield the knife. The world had already painted him as a villain, and he never corrected it. But Zeus, ever loyal, refused to accept that silence as truth, because that dog had seen what Lila had only glimpsed. No one knew why Lila still carried Zeus's service harness everywhere, even when he wasn't wearing it. No one asked why she sometimes traced the stitched words with her finger. Mommy's boy. She didn't need to explain it, because deep down, Lila remembered everything. She remembered the voice that didn't belong in their house that night. She remembered the sound of glass shattering, followed by her mother's laugh. Not afraid, not surprised, just bitter, like she'd expected it. And she remembered the cold silence that followed. Only Zeus had known the truth the moment it began. And now, thanks to the signal, the one her mother had taught her in secret, they had one final chance to expose it. The courtroom was never supposed to be a battleground, but that morning, it felt like war. Lila sat silently at the edge of the witness stand. Zeus rested at her feet, calm as ever, his gaze never straying from the prosecutor. His ears were relaxed, but alert, listening for something no one else could hear. The prosecution tried to move past the moment, dismiss it as coincidence. They called it an emotional outburst from a confused child and an unpredictable animal. But inside that room, everyone felt the shift, because the K-9 didn't just walk to the prosecutor, he obeyed a command, and that command hadn't been used in public in 6 months. The judge ordered a brief recess. Lila's aunt rushed to her, but Lila didn't move. She just sat there, frozen, her eyes flicking from Zeus to her father, then back to the man her mother once called a family friend. The prosecutor, Owen Maddox. He had joined their lives just before things started to break. And now, something was wrong. Flashback. 6 months ago. Owen Maddox had been their lifeline when Daniel spiraled. He was the one who helped them move out when the fights became unbearable. The one who showed up with groceries, helped with Zeus's vet bills, offered legal advice when Daniel got suspended from the force. Lila remembered how her mother smiled when he came over, but it was never a full smile. It was tight, careful, like she was trying to be polite, to a snake. Sometimes Zeus would growl when Owen entered the house. Her mother scolded the dog gently, but Lila noticed something strange. She never scolded him in front of Owen. She waited until he left. Why, in the present, the investigation reopens. That same night after the courtroom incident, the defense team filed a request to have Zeus evaluated by a behavior specialist and former K-9 handler. The request was granted. Officer Marie Keller had worked with dogs like Zeus her entire career. She didn't believe in coincidence, and Zeus, well, he didn't lie. Under a controlled test, Keller gave Zeus a modified version of Lila's hand. Signal. Zeus responded instantly, not with aggression, but by sprinting to her file folder, the one containing evidence from the crime scene. He pawed at a photograph. Keller pulled it free. It showed a small ceramic angel figurine from the bathroom. Counter shattered beside the tub. The prosecution said it was accidental damage during the struggle. But Keller noticed something else. Blood on the bottom of the figurine. That meant it had been used as a weapon and dropped afterward by someone standing outside the tub. That same night, Lila woke in a sweat. She couldn't speak, but she could draw. And on a blank sheet of paper she sketched something she'd never told anyone before. A tall figure, not her father, standing in the bathroom doorway, holding something over her mother's head, and Zeus, on the other side of the door, scratching to get in. She had seen it, through the crack. And the worst part? Her mother let it happen. She closed the door behind her attacker, shielding Lila, choosing silence. The deeper they dug, the darker it got. Owen Maddox had once been Daniel's partner on the force. But after a corruption scandal, Daniel tried to expose something involving Owen. The report disappeared. Daniel was suspended, and Owen? He got promoted and suddenly had a bright legal future. Court records showed that Lila's mother, Maya Riker, had reopened an inquiry against Owen 2 days before she died. She'd sent evidence to Internal Affairs, a sealed USB drive. It was never found at the scene, because it was never meant to be found. It was hidden inside Zeus's vest, and the only one who knew how to unlock it was Lila. The more the world tried to speak for her, the more Lila turned to Zeus. At night, she would press her forehead to his, and somehow the K-9 always responded with a slow blink and a gentle whine, like he knew what she was carrying. One evening, when her aunt broke down crying, Lila reached for Zeus's vest, unzipped the hidden pocket, and pulled out the USB drive. Her aunt didn't understand what it was, but Lila pointed to the hand signal chart her mom had made on the fridge. She tapped the one labeled, "Trust the dog." The USB contained audio files, recordings Maya had made secretly. One was of Owen threatening her. "You think anyone will believe you over me? You're married to a drunk. They'll call it a domestic accident. You'll be dead, and your kid won't even know the difference." Another recording was from the night she died. The struggle, the sound of her voice, her final words whispered. Through clenched teeth, "Lila, the signal, show Zeus." But just when the defense believed they had everything, the final nail in the coffin, the USB disappeared, vanished from the evidence room. Owen Maddox filed a motion to declare the evidence inadmissible, claimed it was planted, said the dog had been manipulated. The judge looked ready to agree. Until Lila walked into court, wearing her mother's old scarf, and gave Zeus the signal in front of the entire courtroom, and Zeus, again, walked straight to Owen, and this time growled. Suddenly, the judge received a message from Internal Affairs. They had reopened Maya Riker's file 6 months ago because someone had anonymously sent a backup copy of the USB, and they'd matched a partial fingerprint on the ceramic angel to Owen Maddox. The courtroom erupted, but Lila didn't flinch. She just leaned down and kissed Zeus on the head, because somehow, even without words, she had told the truth. The courtroom buzzed with the chaos of a war ending. Owen Maddox had been taken into custody. The backup USB had been verified. The judge officially ruled Daniel Riker's charges dropped, pending final review. Lila's aunt wept into her hands. "Daniel?" He didn't cry. He just looked at his daughter for the first time in months with something like hope flickering in his eyes. Like maybe, just maybe. He hadn't lost her forever. Reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. "Hero dog saves girl," the headline screamed. "K9 exposes killer prosecutor." But none of them knew what Lila knew, because something still felt off. That night, she was supposed to sleep peacefully. But Zeus wouldn't lie down. He kept circling. The apartment, nose to the corners, ears perked like he was waiting for a sound he couldn't find. Her aunt brushed it off. "He's just adjusting." But Lila couldn't shake the feeling, and when she opened the hallway closet, the one she used to hide in, she saw it, a shadow, scratched into the wood from years ago, her mom's initials. Beneath them, hastily carved, the number 2. Not a date, not a time. A second copy. She raced to Zeus, checked his vest again. Nothing. Then she remembered, after the judge ruled the recordings legitimate, all devices were sent for evidence locking. But the second copy. Her mom had hidden it somewhere else. Lila had missed it. Everyone had. Meanwhile, miles away, Owen Maddox sat handcuffed in a secure holding room. A guard dropped a note in front of him. An anonymous message, no signature. It read, "The girl still has it." His eyes narrowed. Then he smiled. Because for men like Owen, prison wasn't the end. It was just another move in a longer game. The next day, Zeus was gone. Her aunt said she'd let him out in the yard, but the gate had been left open. Panic ripped through Lila's chest like ice. She tried to tell her aunt with gestures, frantic drawings, anything, but no one understood. Because no one else saw the trap being set again. No one else knew the story wasn't over, and in that moment, standing, in the empty yard, the wind howling through the broken gate, her mother's signal book clenched in her fists, Lila finally realized they weren't the only ones who knew the signal. And if Zeus was missing, then someone was using it against him. That night, the silence of the house was almost as piercing as the chaos that had rattled the courtroom days ago. In the dim glow of a lone street lamp filtering through a cracked window, Lila sat curled up on the cold hardwood floor of her empty living room, clutching her mother's signal book like a talisman. The echoes of earlier victories now felt distant, ghostly reminders of a truth that was slipping through her fingers. The absence of Zeus was a fresh wound. His warm presence, always a steady beacon in her dark world, had been replaced by a gaping void filled with unanswered questions. Lila's heart pounded erratically as tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. Each tear carried the weight of betrayal. Betrayal not only by those who were supposed to protect her, but also by the silent promises of safety that her mother had once given her. In the flickering shadows, memories unfolded like brittle film. The sound of her mother's soft voice teaching the secret signals, the comforting weight of Zeus's head on her lap, and the gentle hum of reassurance that had filled her early childhood. Those were the moments when the world was simple, even if fraught with unspoken dangers. But tonight, every memory felt hollow and heavy, a constant reminder that the safe haven she had clung to was now irretrievably lost. The force of the night's revelations had battered her resolve. Lila remembered how, in the courtroom, she had boldly given the signal, a small, precise movement that had held so much meaning. But now, that act of defiance twisted in her mind, like a ghost. Had it been a mistake? Was the truth she had yearned to expose actually another thread in a dangerous tapestry of deceit? Questions swirled relentlessly, leaving her breathless and numb. In the depths of her despair, Lila felt the crushing weight of isolation. Her aunt's strained reassurances, the vacant stares of strangers at news events, and even her father's distant, broken look during that brief moment of familial hope, all converged into a singular, overwhelming sense of abandonment. Every whispered secret that had brought them a fleeting taste of justice now left her with bitter loneliness. In that moment, the idea of trust seemed as fragile as the shattered remnants of a ceramic angel, once found as evidence and now mired in doubt. Just as the darkness threatened to consume her, a sliver of realization emerged from the depths of her aching soul. Amidst the ruins of shattered hopes, she recalled one last lesson her mother had taught her, a wordless promise etched into every gentle gesture. Endure. It was a lesson learned from pain, from the silent screams that had once echoed in her young mind, and from the resilient heartbeat of Zeus, who had never faltered despite the turmoil around him. A trembling hand reached out to trace the faded lettering on the signal book, the ink almost smudged like tears over time. In that quiet, forlorn moment, Lila realized that her silence was not a surrender, but a seed waiting for the right moment to sprout into courage. The betrayal and the despair, as soul-crushing as they were, could be the very catalysts needed to fuel the quest for truth. Her grief was raw, a deep, aching echo that threatened to silence her forever. Yet within that unbearable melancholy lay an ember of defiance. Zeus had given his life to guard the secret, a secret that still pulsed with the power to expose the veiled conspiracies surrounding her family's tragedy. Lila's heart, battered but unyielding, yearned to find Zeus, to reclaim what had been stolen, and to unlock the final piece of the puzzle hidden behind that elusive second signal. As the night deepened, Lila's tear-streaked face slowly transformed into one of resolute determination. The crushing night of despair had not broken her, it had prepared her. In the silent promise of the darkness, she understood that tomorrow would bring more than sorrow. It would bring a chance to fight back, to reclaim the truth, and to honor the memory of the one she loved most. And so, beneath the cold, watchful gaze of the moon, Lila rose. With trembling resolve and a heart full of quiet rage, she whispered to herself, "I will find you, Zeus, and I will set everything right." It started with a whisper, not from a person, but from the past, a memory, a pattern, a flicker of instinct buried beneath grief. 2 days after Zeus vanished, Lila sat alone at her mother's grave, the signal book in her lap. The air was thick, with spring fog. The world was silent, too silent, as if it, too, was holding its breath. She stared at the old engraving, "Emily Riker, beloved mother." Truth never dies. Truth never dies. But it could be buried. Lila traced the last page of the book again. There was something wrong, not with what was written, but with how it was written. Her mother's perfect handwriting had changed on the final page, slightly slanted, uneven, shaky. It wasn't a message for Lila. It was a message left in fear. And it wasn't complete. That's when it hit her. What if the second copy wasn't just a duplicate, but a continuation? Back home, she rummaged through the few things the system hadn't taken. There was one box they'd never opened. Not because it was hidden, but because it looked like a child's keepsake chest. Old birthday cards, hair ribbons, stickers, but under the false bottom, she found it. A flash drive. And next to it, a folded note in her mom's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you found the first signal. But the real truth, Owen's truth, is here. Be careful, Lila. He's not working alone. Her hands trembled. She didn't go to her aunt. Didn't go to the police. She knew now. Someone inside had helped Owen plant and destroy evidence. Maybe even tipped him off the day Zeus went missing. She needed someone who wouldn't flinch. She went to Daniel. Her father had changed. Prison had broken the shell of the man he once was, but it hadn't destroyed him. He listened without interrupting as she placed the flash drive on the table between them. The old light in his eyes, the one that used to guide her through her worst nights, flickered to life again. She didn't need words, just her gaze. He understood. What they found on that drive shattered everything. It wasn't just proof of Owen's abuse of power. It was a network. Emails, video calls, wire transfers from judges, from child welfare officials, from members of the very system that had claimed to protect her. And most damning of all, footage, a hidden camera placed by her mother in their old living room. Grainy, low quality, but unmistakable. Owen, talking to someone off camera. Emily's kid is sharp. She sees things. I want her re-evaluated. If she talks, we all go down. Then, a pause. A female voice responded, "She won't. Not if we silence the mutt." Lila dropped the laptop. Her hands were ice. That voice, she knew it. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't someone far away. It was her aunt. Everything unraveled in her mind at once. The warm meals, the comforting arms, the way her aunt had always pushed her to forget the past, to let Zeus go. She hadn't let Zeus run away. She had handed him over. They needed a plan. Daniel made a call to someone he once trusted in the force, now retired. A man who owed him a debt from an unsolved case years ago. The man agreed. "I've got eyes on the compound. The dog's there, sedated, but alive. A private estate on the outskirts of town, registered under a dummy name. Owen's escape plan." They couldn't wait for authorities. Not this time. They had one shot. Daniel prepared everything: files, time-stamped videos, logs, and the second flash drive. He told Delilah, "We take it straight to the federal courtroom. Live hearing. Judge Adams. He's clean." Lila nodded, but inside she was already bracing for what it would cost. They arrived at the compound at 3:14 a.m. Fog blanketed the field like spilled milk. Daniel, armed only with a flashlight and the old badge from his days on the force, guided Lila to the back. She carried the signal book, wore Zeus's old training clicker around her wrist, just in case. A soft whimper broke the silence. Her heart stopped. It came again, low, muffled, but unmistakable. Zeus, they found him in a shed, weak, drugged, but alive. The moment Lila touched his fur, his eyes opened, barely, and then he wagged his tail. It wasn't over yet. Suddenly, footsteps. Lila ducked. Owen's voice. "I told you, we should have ended this years ago." A silhouette moved outside the shed window. Flashlight beam sweeping. Then another voice, her aunt's. "You think she's just going to let this go now? We should have taken her when we had the chance." Daniel signaled for silence. He mouthed, "We're getting out." But Zeus rose, wobbly, and took one step toward the door. Another. Then he turned to Lila. She recognized the look. Signal. It was his turn. She gave the faintest flick of her wrist, the same signal they'd used in court. Zeus lunged, not at them, but at the stacked crates behind them, knocking over a camera she hadn't noticed. It clattered loudly, catching the intruder's attention. Footsteps rushed in, too late, because Daniel had already transmitted the files from a satellite router hidden in his coat. RAN sirens rose in the distance, real this time. Federal agents, warned by the transmission, were descending fast. But the final moments were chaos. Owen tried to flee. Her aunt screamed, but it was Lila's voice, silent, sharp, decisive, that stopped everything. Not with words, but with one last signal, a closed fist to her chest, then outward. Protect. And Zeus, weak and barely standing, positioned himself between her and Owen one last time. Judge Adams held the flash drive like it was radioactive. Then he looked at Lila. "She didn't just prove her father innocent," he said slowly. "She exposed a conspiracy that spans a decade." He turned to Owen and the others. "And it took a little girl, and a dog, to do what our entire system couldn't." Zeus rested beside her feet, head gently on her shoe. The courtroom erupted in applause, but Lila didn't smile. She just looked down and whispered silently to him, "You came back." And this time he didn't bark. He simply closed his eyes and rested. "Absolutely, Cameron. Let's drop the final emotional grenade. That last twist the audience won't see coming." A week had passed. Lila stood at the edge of the lake where she and Zeus used to play when she was little. The sky was calm. The world, finally, felt still. The courtroom victory had been all over the news. Owen and her aunt were in federal custody. Investigations were expanding. Her father had been formally cleared. Zeus was recovering. Slowly. He wouldn't be in the field again, but he didn't need to be. He had done enough. She closed her eyes, clutching the signal book one last time. This chapter, finally, felt closed. But just as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered hesitantly. Silence. Then a voice crackled through the line. Male. Cold. "You really think this was about your mother?" Lila froze. The man laughed softly like he was amused by her fear. "Emily was just a crack in the dam, sweetheart. You blew it wide open. But the rest of us? We're still here." Click. Dead line. The blood drained from her face. She looked down and realized something was tucked under the windshield wiper of her father's truck. A photo. Her. From yesterday. Walking Zeus. A single word scribbled across it in red ink. Stay. Her heart thundered. She spun around, scanning the trees, the lake, the empty gravel road. Nothing. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. The conspiracy wasn't just a mistake. It was a machine, and someone was watching her.